I was just gonna say...
I have a mouth and I will scream.
Hey, exactly. Welcome to No Clip. I'm Chad Rutherman.
I'm JJ Artemez.
And I'm Andy Koenig.
And today we're going to be talking about Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, which was released in 2017, developed and published by Ninja Theory. Which I think we have to get out of the way immediately. The reason that people talk about this game... Well, I'm saying this now, which might show a little bit of my bias on this. Mm-hmm. But the primary reason this game was brought up is because Ninja Theory decided to make this game on sort of a shoestring budget. It is referred to as like an independent AAA game. And I think a lot of what we say sort of has to be taken in light of that. And specifically how this could have maybe been not the best idea. Either way, it made back its money. It was generally commercially successful, and a lot of people praised it for some of the thematic things that the game did.
And the sensitivities. I gotta give props to a game whose literal first credit is like their mental health advisory contact.
Right. Well, which they actually worked with like numerous people in that field to sort of create an accurate depiction of psychosis.
Yeah. So the goals here, or from the top to the bottom, especially considering it's coming from Ninja Theory, are wonderful. The ability to make something this beautiful in the modern day and not have it be like completely publisher backed is itself worthwhile. And when I put this out in front, so we can set the tone for our later discussions that are going to probably veer into other downward, depressing trajectories.
Yeah.
That I'm happy this game exists, and I do not think it is bad.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The ambition or like the idea of doing a game like that's like this that is AAA quality.
Yeah. For
the most part, but without a studio, like on a smaller budget, is a good, I think, or an interesting idea. And I think this was a good first attempt. But, I'll leave it at that for now.
Fair enough. The key here, because with a publisher with like a lot of investors backing this kind of a project, you probably wouldn't get the type of narrative that they went for. Like, especially when you're a name like Ninja Theory, because all due respect to them, like their games are generally like people like Ninja Theory, some more than others, and some people hate them for like they did Other M, right?
Yeah, I think they did Other M.
Yeah, that's really the main thing, that they
did.
fucked up that game pretty bad, is why people don't like them. Otherwise, they're like a fairly well-rounded studio with like a catalog of releases.
Too many puns by saying well-rounded in this context.
But this concept would be like, can we play this down? Can we make it less obvious what's going on, or just do away with the mental illness angle entirely? Mm-hmm. I can imagine that conversation happening in a bigger thing, especially since they don't have like a big name to their company.
This was a game that wanted to make you uncomfortable and did. It made me uncomfortable, but it made me uncomfortable to such an extent that it made me not want to play the game or engage with it. Like, it was... like, it's one of those... Oftentimes, when games have to try and put forward really strong themes about dark things, they always have to present it with either some kind of mechanic set that allows you to keep you engaged anyway, and often undercuts the... intentional or otherwise, a lot of the punch of those kind of things. It was the kind of stuff that Spec Ops: The Line was commenting about with shooters, where in all the old Call of Duty games were trying to impart on you this sense of like, war is hell, people die all the time, no matter where you are, but everything that you were doing, the fun of that was all about and be like, yeah, shooting people.
Right. Which, of course, in Spec Ops, which we'll talk about forever and never do an episode on, in Spec Ops, you have this loop that starts fun and then becomes boring because they want to increase the contrast. Which this game doesn't go for that, like,
No.
because it's not trying to make that kind of a statement.
No, this game is just oppressive for the most part. Just painful, just uncomfortable. It's art that's successful, but it's not a goal that I think a lot of people are really going to want to pursue, which is why this isn't the kind of project that would normally have publisher backing. Because who would want to, put money behind a project where the end goal is to make the people who engage with it, like, deeply uncomfortable for a long period of time?
Right. Now, unless we have additional things to say, sort of like laying out the groundwork of what we're talking about, I'd really like to get into why it is that this game becomes difficult to play. Specifically, the difference I presume exists between the way that you, JJ, and I engaged with this game. Because you bring up the concept, and I mean, I feel like Andy probably sits comfortably in a middle ground here where the theming of the game doesn't put you off. And you're probably not as upset about it mechanically as I was.
That sounds about right.
I could be the no-clip psychologist. I know exactly how all of your minds work. While the themes of the game and the way that they reinforce the mental illness don't put me off of wanting to play the game, they're actually the things that sort of kept me moving forward until I got to a point where I didn't want to continue moving forward anymore. I feel like for me, anyway, it was a purely mechanical failing that made this game sort of unenjoyable for me.
Yeah. It was... The way that I always tried to phrase it, and that was becoming clearer in my mind as I went through, was that this game feels like the shortest padded game that I'd ever played. If the mechanic set that existed in this game was all that they have and all that they wanted to go with, this game should have lasted for half as long as it did, and I would have been fine with it. But the mechanics just can't put up with the amount of weight that they were placed under for that long a period of time. We can't keep fighting the same, 5 different enemy types.
Yep.
Right, yeah. I was really enjoying the game for, the first third. And then it's 5 enemy types and, 3 kinds of puzzles, maybe.
Yeah.
And it's for, and it's 2/3 more of the game left, and it's oh no. I gotta keep doing the same thing over and over. Find those runes.
I didn't even realize that it was... For me, I didn't know that I was 2/3 of the way through, because I was just under the impression when I started this, and be it's going to be a really pretty, really tiny thing, and because I assumed it was tiny, I kept... And the narrative sets this up. Right... Every moment after you beat the first 2 zones, which I legitimately loved, and you go through the gate across the bridge toward which is supposed to be your end goal.
And the cool thing smashes you into the ground.
Yes. Every scene I thought was the scene that was to set up to the end of the game. And I was 1/3 of the way through the game.
I felt exactly the same way.
Yeah.
Every moment after that I thought was going to be the last thing.
Yeah. Well, they do such a fantastic establishing shot of that building or whatever you want to call it, the big mass of wood that looks like an eagle or whatever it's supposed to look like across that bridge. As soon as you walk out onto that beach and you see it, you're oh, I want to get there.
Yes.
That is my goal. Immediately. So when you beat the first 2 areas and you open that door, you're on that bridge, you're this is it. I'm there. And it's nope. You have to do a whole bunch more shit to get back there.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is that it was shit. Because it got to a point where the things that you were doing stopped being engaging because you'd just done them 100 times in a row.
Yes.
We will talk at length about the aesthetic design and the way that the narrative sort of plays along, and all of the aesthetic stuff that makes this game what this game actually is in a holistic sense.
Yeah.
But my God, were they just how do we make this game longer than 4 hours? And they were just like, oh, just have him fight a guy, and then when he dies, put another guy there, and just do it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Repeat forever.
And give them shields.
Fuck that guy.
So you can't hit them at all.
Yeah, okay, so we had, like, you know, a semi-shared experience having both played the game and have already talked about it a little bit. You know the anime type that's the barbarian, the big dude with the giant wooden shield?
Yeah.
Did you find an entertaining way to fight them?
Yeah, you press the punch button, and you break their guard, and then you head them with swords.
That isn't fun, though. There are two ways to fight them, which is to use the melee and then hit them once. And then go like, all right, hold on, because they get the shield back up right away. Or you dodge the attack and attack them once and do the same thing. Either one takes 1,000 years and is boring.
Or you have to build up the focus.
Yeah, so you just walk around them and do the heavy attack until they die.
Yeah.
But that shitty enemy type aside, like I feel like there's this part of the game. Where you go into the admittedly very cool, like, river of blood with all of the corpses reaching out to grab you.
When I played that part, I was like, oh man, Chad is going to love this part.
Yeah, I know, it was super great.
What a great way to end the game.
Exactly.
What a great last level of the game.
You would think, like, literally, like, wading through a river of blood in hell would be the end of the game.
Yeah, no, I expected to get up to, like, the area where you go up, like, a hill, and there just to be, like, Gygus there.
Yeah.
Like, something that was, like, final.
And it was so, like, visceral, too. It's, like, the most, like, terrifying and, I say, like, realistic, because I don't know what other word to use, but, like, depiction of hell that I've ever seen in media. Like, it was disturbing and terrifying and off-putting. And then it's just kind of like, okay, let's move on from this to the next thing.
Let's go some dank caves again.
Yeah.
Some nice cave dankness.
It's like, and it ends up being, like, really downplayed.
Mm-hmm. Like, we're going to Helheim, right? And I've been only, like, kind of paying attention to the audio logs because they designed it in such a way that the audio logs stop playing if you walk too far away from them.
That's the dumbest decision ever.
We already had this conversation where it was like, you can go a certain distance from them, and then, like, it very quickly fades out. Mm-hmm. So it's like they tried to do the thing that other games do with, like, when you get far enough away from something, the audio dims and then fades away, like you can't hear it anymore. But it's just, like, full volume for, like, 100 yards, and then, like, at 101 yards, you can't hear it anymore, and it just, like, really quickly just kind of...
Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
And then it stops playing, and you can't walk back toward it. Like,
right.
It just like, oh, you're bored with the audio track because you walked away from the physical object that it's producing.
And I have to, like, I'll give them benefit of the doubt because I'm me, because they use so many proper nouns in the audio logs that it was really difficult for me to follow what that narrative was about. I'm sure that if I listened to it and, like, took notes or just was more familiar with Norse mythology, that whole bit probably was well written and good, because most of this game is well written and good in that regard. Right. Mm-hmm. But man, did I like the end, the guy was like, in Ragnarok, I was like, neat, cool. Yeah. Like, I'm not, whatever, I guess.
I think I was, like, just familiar enough with enough Norse names that I was able to follow it.
That's fair.
This plays in to part of my, like, big theory of contrast, where I think the things that make me disproportionately enjoy the quality of any piece of media I consume is oftentimes just how big the gulf between, like, the tonal highs and tonal lows are. Mm-hmm. This game is good at depicting what it's trying to depict, which is a tonal low, but it holds that note the entire time, and that's equally true of everything. It's equally true of the audio logs. Every audio log is like, and then a dramatic thing happened, and the father and or son of this person did a thing, but he was betrayed. Like, there they're well written and well recorded, but they're like the same, and so they just bleed into you because there's never a time where there's this like glorious happy moment where it sounds like the cadence of the speaker is different. The cadence of the speaker is always a guy depicting legend in like a
and
solid
he's got the
tone.
perfect voice for it too.
Yes.
Yeah, it's such a great delivery.
But it's very flat. It's flat extravagance.
Yes.
Where it's like a guy giving a lecture without a microphone to a group of 200 people. Like, he's got to deliver this information, so he says it loudly, speaking from the diaphragm.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always the same.
It's almost as if he's in a recording booth getting paid to say these things.
But this is the dichotomy, though, because while tonally it maintains good throughout, the quality of the voice acting is actually like well above par.
Oh yeah, way above.
Yeah.
And I have to give a particular shout out to the game. I think refers to them as Furies, the voices in her head. Do such a good job of sort of providing that back to the point where I don't even really remember the music because it wasn't anything special really. But I very distinctly remember being harrowed by voices the entire time.
Yeah. I wanted a scene in this game where she just like finds a flower and like smiles. Like there's a that's what I mean by total contrast here. Like she had her one flashback scene where she was running through the field of flowers meeting with the guy, but surprise, it's undercut by murder and death and horror. Oh,
Yeah.
what a shock. I just wanted that's the difference. I mean, I just wanted to be like, oh man, that was a nice flower. Just like put it down.
You needed the contrast of like an actual like normal happy moment.
Yeah, I
To
needed
give the sad ones weight.
right. I needed a light in the darkness. I needed contrast points, and this game didn't provide it because you don't really ever see a time where she was happy and good. Which I mean, I guess true to
It seems-
her crippling mental illness.
Right.
Like there really wasn't a time where she was completely happy and good and beat this.
It suggested that she's been just fucked up since she was a child.
Yes.
It's because the illness, like the way that they depict it, they don't ever come out and say it, which kudos to them for that. For ever exercising that level of like restraint. But they basically imply that everyone that she ever interacted with just assumed that she was born with like a curse. And because it was a curse, she's never had a moment of being like, okay, everything is cool. Except for, I want to say his name's Dylan, but I don't know if that's correct.
No, I think it actually is Dylan.
Okay.
I would say I don't even remember if they say his name, so we're gonna go with Dylan.
No, they say his name all the time.
Oh, do they?
They're like, dude,
man,
is that
did I
Dylan?
not-
Is what she says as she's,
Yeah.
Maybe-
scared and terrified in the darkness.
Right.
Maybe it's because it wasn't a Norse name. those are the ones I remember. Valravn.
Yeah,
really
Valravn,
well.
Druth,
But I know
Oh,
Dylan-
Druth is a solid name.
Druth is a good name.
Yeah.
Apparently it means fool or one who speaks the word of gods, which to me seem like opposite meanings. but beyond that,
Well, maybe the Norse just don't have very high opinions of their gods. The stories certainly didn't paint all of them in a positive light.
that's true. And they did apparently construct a sword to murder them. So they were like, these gods are really cramping our style. What I was getting at, though, is the fact that, so Dylan being the main driving force behind the whole plot of the game, is the tonal contrast point. Like, the times when she thinks and talks about him tend to be the positive moments. Because she's always recollecting on the fact that this person gave her, like, the time of day. And those are, but I mean, obviously the game doesn't show this. Like, it doesn't show her being happy. It just shows her going through the horrible trials.
And striving to get the happiness back.
Right.
Like, and that's part of the reason why so many of the scenes between her and Dylan are the scenes where, like, she's having an episode and he's trying to help her get out of it.
Right.
And, like, and I can understand, if you were a person in that situation, like, that's that's so incredibly valuable. That's something you would of course strive to cling to at all times. But for the tonal purposes that I'm looking for here, I wanted a scene where they just like went picking flowers, or they were just going out trying to grab food, or just doing some approximation of normal in their life.
You needed a scene where you even like play through it, where it's just like a normal day in the life of her and Dylan, or whatever his name is.
Yes.
They even have the
just
moment for it after she gets knocked unconscious.
Yeah.
Because the times where they show you what she's supposed to be fighting for, which is the ways that Dylan can help her through her situation, they're still sad times. They're still like horrible, depressing situations that he's trying to help her through admirably. And so, it's a thing that makes her happy, but it's not a happy scene.
Well, it's also, there's a way that the player is contextualized in this game through that opening dialogue where you're on the boat, in that you are basically joining the narrator as a voice in her head.
Yeah.
Like, it's this weird contextualization where you, the player, can't really ever feel whole because you're a part of somebody who is not. And the game, like, it goes out of its way to stress you out. It has a complete tonal package of a horror game with two, maybe, instances of a mechanical horror conceit.
That's a really good point that I never thought of. This game needed horror mechanics and more of them.
Yeah, and the only thing that ever shows up is a very beginning of the game. It says, like, if you die enough times, we're going to wipe your save. Which I died a lot.
Really?
Yeah, well, it was mostly in one part. I'll just go ahead and tell this story now because it actually relates.
Okay.
The two horror mechanical scenes that I can remember are one, the house, the dark house, where you have to like navigate through the darkness without.
Oh, that might have been my favorite part of the game.
Yeah, it's really good.
Me three.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Probably my second favorite, but we'll get into that in a
All
bit. Like mechanically speaking, yeah, that part is good. It reinforces the sort of helplessness that you don't really have otherwise because you're kind of a fucking badass in combat. Mm-hmm. And then there's the scene where you're running away from the fire in the house. Is one of the other trials, which is a horror mechanic in as much as you can never like stop and rest. That is where I died a whole bunch because I think I was dropping frames or something on the Steam link, and so every time that I would start, it would like delay for a second, and then the screen would come in when I was like running into a wall.
Aww.
So I died like 7 times right there. Plus normally throughout the game as you would, just occasionally dying. And at no point did I think like, oh, this is probably my last life before my save gets deleted.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also, although it didn't really ever succeed in being very scary, like you can't stay in the dark too long or the beast will get you. It's kind of supposed to be a horror mechanic.
That's true, yeah.
That is my least favorite horror mechanic because I disagree. It's used in the context of horror and it sounds like a horror mechanic, but I don't think it is. And here's my argument for this.
I mean, I would agree because it wasn't scary.
Thank you.
I was scared. I don't know if I was scared. I don't think it was.
Every game that uses the when you're in the dark you will quickly die system for horror. There are other games that use it as a super common trope for other things other than horror. Metroid Prime 2 uses it as a different form of resource management.
Okay.
But
I'm going to let you finish your point, but I think I have 2 counter examples.
Okay. Every game that uses it makes it way, way too predictable. What this needs to be scary that I have never experienced in all of my years of video gaming, which probably included dozens of circumstances where I had to go between safety zones in a dangerous black place.
Yeah.
It's always the second you're out of the light, an immediate meter starts, like a timer starts ticking down, and you know you can reach the next one that you see, because it wouldn't be there if you couldn't reach it. Because they obviously want to design these levels so that the point of light that you're seeing is the next direction you want to travel. It's just like basic 3D open world game design. So when everything's predictable, you're never in danger, and nothing is unknown, which is the exact opposite of what you want in a horror mechanic.
Right.
What I want in a mechanic like this is when you're in the darkness, don't just have stuff happen immediately. Just make it just seem fine for a little while, and then random roll some kind of horrible shit that'll happen to you.
So there is a game that did exactly that.
Good.
Which is Amnesia: The Dark Descent.
Oh, fantastic.
Where you have these slow this sanity meter that's not displayed on screen. It's not like an official UI element, but as you spend time in the darkness without a light, you slowly lose. You start hearing things, you'll have visual hallucinations, things like that, which is kind of that. But I also think that your original argument kind of invalidates it, because it isn't like a traversing between safety zones. It's more of a resource management thing.
Yeah.
My one example that I think is the correct way to do this, I love, because I think it both succeeds in being exactly the trope of just not being able to be in the darkness for very long, and also does it in a way that actually makes you feel nervous because you don't know when things are going to happen. The Gru in Zork. The, text adventure game.
I've never played Zork.
Oh! How?
I don't know. Sheer coincidence. I've seen plenty of Zork screenshots. That sort of thing, as I used to say.
Outlast came to my mind.
I guess Outlast makes some amount of sense, but...
Because, when you're in the dark, there aren't, safe zones. It's just you have the option to put up the camera and see. So you don't know if you were, going to, go through the dark and put the camera up and there's just going to be
a guy there. Yeah.
And you don't want to run out of battery, so you can't see the whole time.
Yeah, so that operates kind of in a similar way to Amnesia. I think overall, Outlast probably does the darkness thing better, though Amnesia better game holistically. But this isn't the point of the game of this conversation.
Yeah. Either way, I agree with you on the Outlast point, because the Outlast isn't really... This trope that I'm talking about is safe zone to safe zone.
Right.
Outlast says you have safety that you can press at a button, and because you can't always use it, introduces unknowns naturally into gameplay, because you'll constantly have to put yourself into situations where you don't know what's in front of you.
Right.
Which functionally simulates the kind of we don't know what's going to happen in the dark kind of mechanic that I actually wanted to exist and stuff like this. But either way, that's my rant on why I don't want any more horror tropes of the darkness immediately comes to grab you if you spend any time in it.
On a related note of things that this game uses but doesn't do correctly, the sidling across a ledge thing, I wish would just vanish from existence, because every game does it in the exact same way. There's nothing harrowing about it. You hold up direction on the analog stick, and then you finish it. You just move slower for a second. It's exactly the same thing. You just see... You're oh, look, it's a passageway that's a little bit more narrow than the hallway. Or it's a thing I'm going to have to crouch under. Or it's a ledge. You just keep... It does nothing. You know what's going to happen. There's nothing frightening that ever happens on it.
The correct way, I think, to use those is the way that, Zelda games do, which is where it's, hiding a path. You're oh, you didn't notice that little ledge you could go across. That's the way to get up there.
Your other option is to give your player some agency of things to do when you're on the ledge, so that you could theoretically throw an enemy at them and they have to fight them. But in this game, you're just going to walk across the ledge and nothing's going to happen.
In almost every, straight 3D modern game, you're just walking across the ledge and nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why this mechanic, as it's implemented everywhere, feels so bad to us is because I frankly don't think it's for us players of the game. I think the mechanic is for trailers, and that's the only reason that it exists in any game.
Yeah,
it's a nice action shot.
Yeah, it's a fantastic action shot for when you're just watching what's going on passively. And that's it.
Which is fine if there's something going on, but so often you're just in a cave.
When I say something's going on, I literally just mean like what it does,
like
is the
a
equivalent-
1-second clip of like somebody going past while they play exciting music.
Yeah. It's like in a film where they just like they just switched camera angles for a second while they go to a different thing.
Right.
That's what it seems like it's trying to represent, because there's no actual tension there. Like, is there even a single video game in history where it's possible for you to sidle on a ledge and fall?
Metal Gear Solid 2.
I mean, Metal Gear Solid 2.
Good job.
You can slip on bird poop and fall if you don't notice it in Metal Gear Solid 2. It's great.
So, Chad, you play this on Steam, right?
Yeah. With a Wii U Pro controller.
Okay. So when you were not sidling,
really nice.
Instead you were just going across planks of wood over top of.
We had to
pit.
do the balance thing.
How did that work with the Wii U or on the Steam with the Wii U Pro controller?
How did it work?
Because
Presumably
does
on
the
the PS4
controller have motion?
It has
okay,
gyro,
I thought
yeah.
so. Because like the first like half of the game, I must have been sitting like super still because I didn't think you could fall off there. I just always walked straight across with no issue. And then I hit one where I must have been like, like lounging. Right. And then like I just like immediately like fell off. And I was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Me too. I thought it was just another sidling mechanic.
So then from then on I was just like like bracing my
you also
elbows.
just didn't like even engage with that at all? Like it just was like a thing you walked across?
I never died.
I never died doing that. Wait, in the game at all?
Ever. I never, ever died.
Okay. In walking across the ledges, for me anyway, it felt like just like the Tony Hawk grind mechanic.
Okay,
Like,
see, that's
you would
what
just like lean haphazardly from side to side.
See,
you had to correct with the analog.
That's what I assumed it was at 1st, and then it seemed to not really do much of anything.
So that it was
I just thought it
probably
was
a-
just like a do-nothing mechanic, but in fact it is like the gyroscope in the controller.
You Googled this? You know this to be true?
I found out because when, after I had fallen off of one of them, I was like, is this a thing? And yeah, it was. It uses the gyroscope.
Oh, wow.
So I must have just been super still the first like half of my playing experience. Just didn't
I think
notice.
since this is the podcast where we discuss how other games did things better than this game did, I want to shout out how much, like, how no game ever makes use of the PlayStation 4's gyro controls, except the greatest version of this, which is in what's that game with the skull? Until Dawn. In Until Dawn, there's this fucking amazing mechanic where if they're the creatures, which are like your main monster enemy in the game, are around, they can't see you if you don't move. So the game says don't move the controller, and as long as you aren't aware of it, it's like literally the most nerve-wracking thing in the whole world. 'Cause you're just like can't move,
Yeah.
can't breathe.
When someone tells you you can't move, it then becomes really hard not to.
Yeah, it's insanity.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's really, really good.
Yeah.
So you didn't die at all.
I know, yeah, which is part of the reason why the game's threat of we'll delete your save file if you die too many times kind of rang hollow for me quickly.
This totally tracks for you, JJ.
Yeah.
That you just didn't die at all.
My
It's like, I
question-
imagine I played a lot more recklessly than you ever even thought of doing.
Probably.
'Cause, like, by the end of the game, I had, like, the rot had spread all the way up her right arm.
I felt kind of cheated because there were lots of, I think, sequences in the narrative where the rot is pre-programmed to go up. Like, I know for a fact that I never hit a death screen, but the rot like jumped from like forearm to like above elbow after like you fall off the bridge, just like no matter what you do automatically.
Yeah, like she was defeated like in the narrative, so the rot
moves up.
Yeah.
It does. It actually moves up really quickly, and then hangs around points for a while. From my experience, so like mine was at forearm after like 2 deaths. I think like the whole for like you die. It was just like from wrist to here, and then you die again. It goes up to the elbow, and then it stayed at elbow for like most of the rest of the game.
I actually think that they balanced it really well. Because like for me, like I died or failed stuff enough times that it always felt threatening and like a bit stressful.
Right.
Like, oh man, is it gonna actually get to my head? But I think they balanced it in such a way that like it it won't happen to the vast majority of people, but then they'll always feel like it might. You know, like they hit that like kind of sweet spot.
It won't happen to anybody, and that's because, and I'd like to point out
No.
this is not a criticism of the game. I think it's actually a good decision on their part. People tested this almost immediately after the game comes out. It's a hollow threat.
Yeah,
the game will
that.
never delete your save no matter how many times you die ever.
Yeah.
It just lies to you to make you feel that way.
So it can never spread to her head.
No, you can sit there and just let things chop you to death over and over again.
That's not the fastest way to do it, trust me.
Of course you would know.
Yeah.
Sad speedrunner of murder
Dying.
myself. Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to die a whole bunch of times, just go to that one part with the fire and then just let it run you over and over again.
But I want to reinforce that I don't consider that a criticism of this game. I think it's, if anything, a good decision. Like, you get the benefits of both worlds.
I feel like the fact that it's an empty threat makes people... This is what I was going to bring up.
Yeah, I kind of don't like that.
Yeah, because I Googled it as well after finishing the game and realized that it was not real. And that is, I don't know, like, part of me thinks, like, oh, this should probably be a real thing because
Yeah, if
it
you're
would
gonna,
be interesting.
I mean, if you're gonna make the claim, I
Right.
mean, yeah, don't just like lie about
But
it.
games make implied claims like that all the time in the narrative. They just rarely
True,
do it in
but-
text.
Right? Yeah, but they just come out and say it in this game.
I know.
I don't know.
I don't think the jump, I don't think the jump between like, oh no, the fire is going to get you when you're running out of this house that's collapsing, and the game just literally coming up with text on the screen saying like, you're going to die forever if you don't do this thing. I don't consider the difference between those lies particularly meaningful. I mean, we're playing a game. Everything is a lie. All that we experience is lies. We are here for the lies, and I'm all right with that.
yeah.
Now, if this was an e-sport and they lied about a mechanic, that would be
That'd be the
something
worst.
else. Yeah.
What
Just wanted to-
the reason I think it's an empty threat, and the reason that I think that the fact that it is an empty threat is problematic, is mostly just because the game uses it as a way to build tension, and I feel like the only people who would feel the tension are people who are doing particularly badly at the game up until like the very end, because naturally I would say most players will have enough deaths that it starts to be like weigh on them, and I think that that's really, it's important to do that, because I can imagine somebody going and just going like, look, I've already died this many times, I'm just gonna die a whole bunch more times to reset and just try again and die less. And I feel like that would be a huge, like, that person hates this game.
Yeah.
The person who did that. But I don't know. My question for you is how quickly you, like, grasped the mechanics of this game with no explicit tutorial.
I liked that decision. Thought it was a bold move. Liked that they gave themselves the cheeky out of the pause screen.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I did not find the cheeky out until after the initial combat. Like I was sitting there playing it with Rachel beside me, and so we're trying to like go through the tutorial of this game, and a guy comes out and just starts hitting you with a sword in a very obvious, this is a telegraphed animation kind of way. And I'm
Like,
like,
you
oh,
will see for the rest of the game.
yes. And I was like, oh, wait, there are things that I'm supposed to be doing right now? And it just makes you panic and start pressing random buttons. And, I learned the dodge button, the block button, and the light attack button, and just used that to beat the whole first fight. And then after that, just, like, saw the stuff in the pause menu by coincidence when I paused the game once.
Yeah. But the pause menu doesn't actually explain everything. Because I didn't know that you could parry in this game until, like, maybe 30 minutes from the end of the game.
Wow, really?
Yeah, like, I just didn't know it was a mechanic.
Yeah.
He told me that you could charge attacks. I'd never done it. Up until it was the fight with the dog guy.
The beast.
Yeah. And... so I basically used the light attack and the dodge for the whole game.
They kind of half tutorialized charging and some other like later unlocked ancillary mechanics through the use of the voices, which is something that I thought was pretty cool. Like the voices literally say like charge. I don't remember it being as explicit as charge your heavy attack. It might have been charge your strong attack, but it was something close to that explicit. About as explicit as like the Doki Doki Literature Club ending scene of like go into the files and delete stuff.
Right. Yeah.
But it was,
that's not even how I figured it out. Like I just because like especially in combat, like I did not pay attention to the voices. Like there were certain times where they'd fade in and out.
Yeah.
And it's just whenever you do like a full combo, she kind of like takes longer to do the last swing, and like just through seeing that like just caused me to push the button longer, and I just like noticed that like the sword started to glow, and I was like, oh, can I charge attacks? Like, it was just through like natural experimentation that I figured it out.
I don't know if I ever did one successfully, because after you told me I could I remember I was trying to charge light attacks and like couldn't get it to work consistently because it never works. And then from that point I just kind of like gave up on the whole idea and just never did it. I also never blocked. I knew it was there, but I couldn't fathom why I would ever want to in comparison to just moving and attacking. That 95% of my deaths in this game that weren't caused by running into a wall and then being murdered instantly were because I was impatient. Like, I just was like, I just want this to be over to move on to the next thing.
I never blocked either. It has, like, the Kingdom Hearts 2 block problem where it takes it has too much, like, of a wind-up. Mm-hmm. And it just it's like, it would just be 10 times more effective to just dodge.
I kind of just parried everything.
Right. How do you parry?
You'd block at the
when they attack.
Moment,
okay,
yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, never tried because dodging was just
the
easier.
Game not knowing you could parry.
Wow.
So
yeah, I learned about parrying from like just an ancillary Google search. Like I was looking for some other thing, and they were like, "Just parry this guy." I was like, "What the fuck? How do you parry?"
Yeah,
what?
I just got lucky. I think I literally parried obviously on accident, because you can't do it intentionally without knowing it. Like the first attack that I'd ever tried to actually block. Mm-hmm. And from there, and there's the difference between why didn't I knock it away and why didn't I just do this thing, and from there I was golden. So,
yeah. That's the one thing that I mean, I don't think it would have made the combat that much more engaging, realistically, because the enemies are just too vanilla.
Yeah, like I was fine with the combat systems all the way through the first two big zones. I thought they worked well. I particularly liked the Raven boss. I remember him having enough variety in his animations and attacks and the daggers and all that stuff.
Yeah.
That it was a fun fight. But no, knowing about literally everything you can do in combat, which I know that I did. It does not get through the repetition.
Yeah, it sits at this weird middle ground where it's like it doesn't have enough depth to like be fun the whole game, and then like you almost feel like it would be better if they had just like a simpler like system and like focused more on the puzzles or something. You know, it's.
Yeah, I never want to criticize somebody too harshly for doing something that's unique, but I feel as though this game would have benefited a lot from just not having the combat mode where you're locked into like strafing. I think if you had like control over your character and could like move around things, it would solve a lot of the design problems inherent with the way that they do it. Because like the main obstacles to get over in combat in this game are somebody is invulnerable for no reason other than to make you have to use a mechanic, or somebody hits you from behind, which they warn you about, so it's not even that big of an obstacle, but it is an obstacle.
Yeah.
And if they allowed you to have more of a field of vision, they could have actually done more interesting things with the characters. Because there's nothing more engaging about the Berserker enemies with the two axes that like just attack constantly than like a regular guy with a knife, because it's the same mechanic the whole time. Like you just dodge the attack it back, and then repeat forever. It's just the amount of time you have to spend on defense.
Yeah, the enemies themselves feel less like 5 different enemy types and more like 5 variations of the same guy.
Yeah, it's the white skeleton, the red skeleton, and then like the crystal skeleton from the end game of the RPG.
Yeah.
I also think this could have, even with the small amount of variety present here, I think if there was a greater punishment to failing at a lot of these trials. They could have done a lot more with it. Because if there was greater punishment or more permanent punishment for just getting hit once, I don't know how quickly damage heals off of you, but it feels pretty fast.
Yeah.
If that wasn't the case, then they could have gotten away with making a lot of the combats a lot shorter and not having repeat enemies, which would have helped on timing as well.
Yeah, and then the way they scaled up difficulty was just like, let's throw like 12 more guys at once.
Yeah. And it's like, and most of them, they act like enemies do in video games because they don't want to overwhelm the player mechanically. They want the player to feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, and sometimes you can even see them.
Yeah, and you just walk away. Like, you just back up, and like, you'll heal up by the time they make their slow-ass way over to you. Like, it's never been... I don't know. Conversely, I thought the boss fights were actually really good. Pretty much throughout the game. I think I enjoyed almost all of them except for...
the beasts.
Yeah, who just, like... I don't know if it was my vision thing, how I just, like, have a difficult time discerning what's going on in a fight that's, like, obviously about making it difficult to discern what's going on.
Yeah.
And the fact that I didn't know about the charge mechanic, which apparently can, like, hit him out of his invulnerable state.
Yep.
Yeah, that fight was just tedious and boring for me. And you kept going, like, do this thing, do this other thing. Why aren't you doing this thing? And I'm just like... I don't know what's happening, when it's happening, why it's happening, or how to do anything about it. Right. So, and the game doesn't tell you.
Yeah, and you didn't know that, like, slashing at, like, the empty air while they're invulnerable, like, charges your focus faster.
Right.
I didn't either.
Yeah, if, like, the enemies, like, throw down, like, even the regular enemies, throw down, like, the smoke and they go invulnerable, you just kind of, like, hack at the smoke, it, like, fills your focus up, like, super fast. So that you can then just kill them regular. Which comes in very, very handy on that boss.
Yeah. I was always kind of unclear on what caused your focus meter to fill. So.
I think it's dodging attacks and then for some reason
attacking
hitting
smoke.
ghost smoke men.
Yeah, dodging, parrying, and then I guess swinging wildly at invulnerable.
Yeah, and I think actually just like hitting enemies a bunch, just like with regular attacks, fills it up, but like super slow.
Yeah.
Unless you have something super interesting, I wanted to circle back to something JJ said at like the beginning of that conversation, where you said you thought it was a bold move for them to not have like a tutorial.
Yeah.
I agree with that statement, like on paper, but like while playing this game, I feel like I didn't even really notice that. And the fact that it didn't have a HUD either is something I didn't think about till like after I finished the game.
Right.
And it's like when you hear someone like that stuff's praised all the time, like, oh, no tutorial, no HUD. Like people praise Eco for doing that, like in the PS1 era or PS2 era.
I bought a copy of the King Kong video game because somebody was like, "This game's amazing. There's no HUD."
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm questioning how like bold it actually is if it's something I didn't even think about until like after I finished the game.
There's so
like
many...
in reality, you know, like perception versus the reality of the situation.
Right.
There's a ton of games now that have gotten so good with selective HUDs and natural tutorials that I don't think the gap between it's only present and only for a little while and only when you need it is that large between that and just not having it at all. Mm-hmm. Like, in the early days, in the days when Eco came out and everyone flipped shit, it's because the very concept of, like, a HUD-less game was completely ridiculous. Like, there were so many things that would be in the way all the time because it was so much harder to convey information.
Right.
But nowadays, we've just gotten better at this. Like, it's really comparatively easy for people to either... make sure you can have really complex HUDs even, but just run with intelligent enough systems that they are, when they need to be out of the way to keep things pretty, they are. Mm-hmm. Like I don't think this game is the fact that this game has no HUD. I feel like doesn't make it significantly better or more atmospheric for that reason than like the way Breath of the Wild's HUDs went away every time you were just out walking around.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like I feel like both are equally good.
I mean, that even exists as, like, a toggle option in a lot of games at this point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
this game obviously had that in mind when it was being developed. Now, I'm not going to make a claim about the chicken or the egg here, but like the part of the reason why the kind of unengaging regenerating health mechanic exists is because of the lack of a HUD, or vice versa. Either they set out to make a game without a HUD, and that basically requires regenerating health if you don't want to go all in on trying to like signal to the player how much health they have left in a diegetic way. Or they had regenerating health and then said, well, why do we even need a meter or anything? So just get rid of it. Yeah. Which they still do have a meter in the form of the mirror that shows you how much focus you have. But even that I felt like could have been taken off because like they yell at you every time that you have focus. So.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, the voices do help with that. Like they do a lot of the work of the HUD.
Yeah. And I think that was a really good decision. On that note, do we want to take a break?
I could use some more coffee.
Yeehaw.
All right.
Break time.
To keep up my podcast excitement.
I don't know what we're going to
I will podcast with you in Ragnarok.
Oh, don't say the phrase Ragnarok.
Welcome back from the break. Well, I think we were a bit negative.
Just a tad.
To put it lightly, I guess.
We started with mechanics, and they deserved it.
Yeah. Well, we didn't even intend to start with mechanics, but I assumed that the blood was boiling coming into this, and so we just had to go in on that. We didn't even really talk about the puzzles other than they were boring and lackluster, which is all that they needs to be said about them. But this game does do shit well. And specifically that shit is, one, this game looks really good. And two, they have good actors doing lots of good things in it.
Scary eyes.
Scary
mocap eyes, very terrifying. Both, most particularly on the player character.
Right.
That blue paint used to accent those constant, like, wide white orbs freaked the fuck out of me all the time. And, like, actual just FMV through all of the other people.
There was such a struggle for me at the beginning to be like, am I really looking at just like a dude? Like, are we Night Trap up in here?
Yeah.
We were, yeah. That was full FMV.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very jarring.
It's kind of like the ATM machine. I should have just said entirely FMV, not full motion video.
But yeah, very jarring. Especially what stood out to me the most, that one scene where she's like laying on the ground and then he's like mirrored, like, you know, like laying next to her, and it's just like, that's a guy.
That's a real guy.
And that is a rendering of a video game character.
Yeah.
Like,
and I'm glad it's jarring. It works for the jarringness they're trying to impose there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like the only time that it feels like, because obviously, I say obviously, I assume that this is done to cut costs, because you don't have to render a person, you just put in the clip.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's more complicated than just being like cut paste in Adobe Premiere, but it's like they have this situation where they don't have to make a whole new thing at the potential risk of it looking super silly and stupid. I feel like they avoid it like 90% of the time.
Agreed.
But there are those occasions where like you see like the full body shot of a guy and you're like, what's this dude doing here in my game, being a weird regular man?
It's because the 90% where they avoid it is because they constantly present the FMV videos as, like, you know, psychic, like paranoid.
That's the other way to do FMV videos, full motion videos.
Is you just have, they seem like paranoid delusions, which is fine because then they always like shade them, or they make the lighting weird. They do stuff to obscure them,
right? So
you get this cool effect where it seems like you're looking at a ghost, but the ghost feels like real, like it's a real ghost that's coming for you. The eyes seem more disturbing because they move like a real person. But when they remove a lot of those obscurities, like in a lot of the scenes that have I don't know, what's his name, like Jillian or something? What's the man?
I think the dude is
Devrin?
is Druth.
No, not Druth. The guy you're in love with. The guy who was lying
Dylan.
Dylan, that's it.
We've said it. This is gonna, because we took kind of a long break just now. To most people, it's been like 8 seconds since you last said Druth.
Both are in character
Dylan,
for me.
rather.
Both
Yeah.
of them are things that I would do in either case. But yeah, like, because they always want to make him seem like clear and important and close to you. They don't want to give him like the crazy distance that like Druth has as this like mysterious over entity. When that means they just generally show him to you, and then you're just like, oh, it's a new dude.
Yeah, I kind of wish that they would have actually had a character model for that character, since they were presenting him in that way.
Like, it's so effective at the very beginning of the game, where it'll just like, he just like kind of busts in on the frame. Like, it's usually like a super uncomfortable close-up of his face. But then as the time goes on and the more aware you as a person become that it is in fact full motion video, you go like, okay, this is becoming less jarring every time and more weird and silly. But that's like the one bad thing that this game did visually. Mm-hmm. Albeit, I think that maybe some of the like camera nonsense got a little bit, like, it felt like too much clutter at sometimes.
I frankly didn't even think that the decision was bad overall. I would have, if I was presented in a world where everything was modeled, or they did exactly what they did with the FMV, warts and all, I would have preferred the FMV. It was a unique enough decision to save the money, and it means someone actually has like the Druth headdress. There's like a guy. There's like all those accessories. Those exist in reality.
Yeah, that dude's Halloween is set for life.
Yeah. You got the voice to back it up too. Mm-hmm. Damn.
Oh, presumably. I didn't look into this. There's like, I guess, a slim possibility that they had a different guy do voiceover. He actually has like a small mousy voice, and they just had like a big buff dude come in and be like, oh, Senua.
Yeah.
I don't know why in my mind he sounds like Sylvester Stallone. That's probably not what's actually happening. Senua.
Whatever. Good things. Good elements of visual design. Forcing things onto rails. Yeah. This game has the most subtle, like, I want to lead you in a direction mechanics that... Not really mechanics. The stereotype that is now like common in 3D video games, where everyone has to try and find their own way to lead the player naturally into a direction they want to go, but they don't put a line on the floor.
Yeah,
like that.
Not our oft discussed shitty arrow.
Yes,
that we've talked about several times.
Yeah, this game wins the like least shitty arrow competition in my experience.
Oh, that's gonna be our year end. We'll do an awards show for our year end for 2018.
Least shitty guidance arrow. Specifically, I think of all the different ways they did this, the one that takes the cake is one of the very first things that I experienced, because so many of my favorite memories of this game come early, is the flame section, where you're going through Fire Guy's world, and just things subtly start to like light on fire when you get near them if you're going the right direction.
Right.
That is cool.
I think, I agree with a lot of that. However, it does kind of highlight one of the things that I don't like much about this game, which is how valuable to the game do you think it really was to have you backtrack through the areas after you finish them?
This game wants to be slow all the time.
True, but I think it wants to be slow so that its total hours count is higher.
Fair.
I don't think that it wants to be slow for any other reason, because they don't do anything with that time. Occasionally they'll have someone, like, talk, but, like, you're going back through the same areas, so there aren't new audio diaries. There's not... They don't put any enemies in your way. All it is just occasionally you'll get some like voiceover from the narrator, and that's it.
Yeah. I would guess that it was for like realism, because this isn't a game where you get to like warp.
True.
Or anything like that. Like, oh nope, Senua had to walk back, so you do too. This
is like a solid narrative game with lots of cuts. You know, think the cut between when you fall off the bridge and wake up. It's willing to take. It's not a continuous experience where you follow the character. Right. I just think. not all of the decisions, I think, to slow the game down were bad. The great acting in this game is very slow acting. Every, like, of the many, like, wails of pain and agony that your character emits, they're all very extended wails. And then I was including that when I was talking about how slow the game was. It seemed to match to me that you had this time to just, like, walk around without any paranoid delusions. It's almost like those times when the 2 times that they happened felt like rewards to me, especially after the Raven guy.
Yeah.
Because after you kill him, there's no more illusions and everything's, like, bright and cheery all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, oh, this is some approximation of normal.
Especially if you're like me and that boss fight took like 20 minutes.
There is one, I don't know, you may not have found this, Chad, because you're you.
That's fair.
Walking back from one of the 2, I think it was the Illusion God, there was a spot where, like, when going forward through the area, you had to, like, climb up out of a cave. When you come back,
I did find this.
Okay, yeah, it's just like you see like a vision of your mom's face in the mountainside, and you focus on it, and she talks to you. It's like that's only visible
On the
when
way
walking back. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's still something that could have been put somewhere else, but it is actually a valuable thing that occurs during that.
Right.
So I can see there's more of an argument for it, maybe, than I would have thought. But
yeah, I lean towards JJ's side too. Like those, I liked those moments. Like they felt like a nice release after like going through this stressful gauntlet of bullshit.
There weren't many releases like that again.
Yeah.
A lot of slow moments, a lot of puzzling moments, but never a moment of where the game was just like, you're fine, everything's fine. Ignore the bodies on stakes, though. Those are still going to be around. But, you know, they're dead, unlike the other not dead things that are coming to kill you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is one of those games where everything that isn't a hallucination is either already dead or trying to kill you, or both.
Yeah, it saves money.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah. This is the reason why, like, we're just starting to hit the point where people are starting to have post-apocalypse fatigue, and I'm worried once that fatigue starts to get stronger, because then it's gonna put disproportionate pressure on developers to make like more lively, believable worlds. Which is hard.
Yeah.
You still got Ruined Fantasy World, which is basically the same thing.
Yeah.
With fantasy paint.
But is notably different from a tonal perspective. Because all of the things that like become popular and become like things societally are done for some reason. Mm-hmm. Like nobody set out to make a zombie game because they thought that zombies were the coolest thing in the whole world.
What?
Like, I think that zombies are just too convenient not to be used as enemies. Like, you look at like Night of the Living Dead, right? The thing that canonized zombies in like American culture is like zombies are being used as a metaphor in that movie, and its sequels, at least up until Land of the Dead, and then I don't really know what happened. That's a whole conversation for only me to have. And then I feel like the whole post-apocalypse thing is in the same boat, where it's like, yeah, post-apocalyptic literature has existed since like the 1800s, but it's like adopted to video games in full force because it means they don't have to like program people walking around.
Yeah.
Right? And this game is like, well, it's kind of like that, but in the afterlife. Sierra Mist. In the afterlife.
Official soft drink of afterlife.
I can see some Sierra Mist being passed out in purgatory. It seems. It's like, oh man, you've got like a 736-year wait.
It's like, do you have any Sprite? No.
Hellblade, Sierra sacrifice. It's kind of like that. But anyway. What were we talking about?
How hell doesn't have Sprite?
Oh no, we were talking about
that.
how this game is not quite a post-apocalyptic game,
right?
But it shares like visual similarities to it.
Yeah, and somewhat of a tonal consistency too. I was just talking about it, and frankly referencing as a future prediction that we're going to hit a point where people are going to be like wanting friendship to be done in a way that is distinct from films and unique to games, and that's going to be so hard until the AIs take over, and then we're going to be fine because we'll have plenty of those. But
Because we'll all be dead.
Yeah, but thematically, the game does a good job of making you feel kind of alone. The places that you're in do start to get a little bit samey, with a couple of very strong exceptions. Whether I'm outside or inside, I still felt like I was in like a horrible torture dungeon place.
Well, yeah, and importantly, when you're outside, you're in like a bowl-shaped like area. Like the way that they construct the levels are always sort of like, you can see out there, but you really only have this like circle that you can walk
you have,
around
like an
in.
enclosed space.
Yeah.
And when
Like
you're
mountains
inside,
and
you're
whatever.
inside a dank cave, where it's so you're limited in both senses, and there's not a whole lot of variety in terms of like the actual play space. Visually, A plus. Like I think they nailed it in both cases. Dank caves are still scary, even if they're not visually interesting. And the world outside looks like raining hellfire.
The lighting distortion effects do so much work in this game. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, a lot of things look a little bit sickly. You know what I mean? Like a little bit yellowish.
Yeah.
Like there's no unmolested plant life around. It's always
Like it's all a little bit dead.
yeah.
I think my favorite psychotic distortion is the recurring one of things get black and white blotchy. That happens, and I have no idea what triggers it, and I have no idea what it's supposed to be associated with tonally. But there are just tons of moments where it feels sufficiently foreboding, where you're just walking, and then like it's so weird to look at visually that I don't even know how to describe it.
Yeah.
Any description that I can think of that comes to mind when you're talking about like black and white blotches is either silly or happy, like Dalmatians, zebras, and other things, and it doesn't really imply the sense of like twisted foreboding that it signals to you as a player.
Yeah, this game did such a good job visually that it makes me like there's a game that I'm kind of looking forward to in like a gross weird way called Agony, which is like supposedly supposed to be a game about actually traversing hell, but they're going for this very literal specific interpretation where everything's all high poly and like well rendered. I love the way this game actually like does the more metaphorical version of hell in every moment of it, where things don't look right, there's corpses all over the place, but they kind of blend into the scenery like it's almost normal that they're there.
Yeah.
That I'm afraid that like any literal depiction of hell is going to seem like hokey in comparison.
Yeah, like too video gamey.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said earlier, like this feels like the most realistic depiction of hell that I've ever seen represented in media.
Right.
And like I really mean it. It was not hyperbole or exaggeration. That was a great point you brought up there, where it does feel like the corpses are just a natural part of the landscape, and it makes me wonder like how many I walked past without even noticing them.
Exactly. It is a realm of endless suffering, and that is all.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like there's a lot of stuff like that kind of think weighs on you subconsciously while you play,
Yep.
and you don't realize it till you're talking about it like this.
On a podcast.
Yeah.
A lot of weights carried.
No, but at the very beginning, like right after the break, you said we were negative, but there's a lot of things that this game does well, and I think
I disagree. I think it's all bad.
Yeah, I've changed my mind. No, but I think when this game is at its best, it's because there's a lot of little elements working together, and those elements are like the visual design, like the environmental design, the voices in her head, like the threat of the rot, etc. Like all those little elements, like they're points and they're strongest in the first third of the game. I think we all agreed.
Yeah.
Where they really work together in unison to like make like they really put you in the character's shoes. They make you feel uncomfortable. They make you feel like almost like guilty. Like you feel like you did something wrong and you're going out to right it through this hellscape.
Yeah.
And it all really works. And I think the game falls down a bit after the first third because those elements start to kind of pull apart.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's my kind of take.
Yeah, on the audio and visual
my
design.
rant there.
Yeah. I think that all kind of works together, and I think that the timeline that you set up is pretty much like spot on. If you graphed like my engagement with this game out, it starts at like maybe a little higher than medium, because like I actually had pretty high expectations coming into this.
Yeah, I thought that this would be a game that you would also really like. I had high expectations for you.
Yeah, I was built up on all of these false expectations. And then it climbed pretty steadily throughout until it hits that midway point, and then it plateaus. Then I do the hell thing. There's a huge spike, putting it at like, this is awesome and great, I love it. And then the actual mechanical execution of the hell thing, where it plummets down to like in the negatives, where I just start really hating it. And then it never gets out of that ditch.
Yeah.
Like it grows a little bit and then like falls a little bit, and then it gets to the end and like the last puzzle's really boring and the actual end of the game is kind of
I actually the final encounter, like the ending, I thought was actually pretty sweet.
Okay, fair.
But, whatever.
Yeah, I wasn't super into it. I didn't like the fact that they gave you you have to die with well, I'm okay with that concept. They give you an unwinnable fight in the form of a bunch of regular enemies, when the thing that you're trying to overcome is like a god. So I don't know why they had to do this weird thing where you're just like plowing dudes down I did it for like 8 minutes before I eventually get taken down. When they could have just been like, oh yeah, the god is 100 feet tall, picks you up and pops your head off like a Coke bottle. Like, I don't... It was totally unnecessary to have that bit, and they could have ended it, considering the game should have ended 3 hours before that anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
Like the rematches with the bosses were okay.
Yeah, I mean,
cool.
I like once you enter that realm and you're just like in badass god mode. Like, they had a cool, empowering like moment at the end. I thought that felt like earned, I guess. Like, it felt appropriate.
It's because the game, partially to make the game last longer, a lot of the things that tried to tonally hit were you being gradually worn down by, hell, a place that kind of grates on you after a while.
Yeah.
And while that's nice, it doesn't lend itself
Hell,
to
that's nice.
to making to really building up the specific opposition that you face. Like, if you stand there and if you grind at parity against something for 8 minutes, that doesn't make the thing you're fighting against feel unwinnable. It makes it feel as strong as you, roughly.
Sure.
It doesn't. And as you were stating, if you're trying to build up like this is an unbeatable foe, the way that you generally want to try and express that, if you aren't going to do it through just other visual indicators, is to make it just crush you. Like maybe you have like a 3-minute fight, and then every now and again, Hella will chime in with some kind of like unblockable AoE thing or some nonsense that takes your agency away, like it's supposed to feel like when you're trying to do an impossible thing.
Right, you need your 1 damage indicators. You need your like white dragon's breath. You need the one-winged angel, something to make it feel really impossible to get over.
Yeah, and the thing needs to have better pacing than to make the pacing entirely dependent on the player's ability, because as you could probably imagine, as someone who just didn't die through the game, it took me a pretty long time to actually finish the game.
Yeah.
When you get to that point, I just quit. Like, I just gave up and was just like,
And
what's
just
going to
was beaten
happen?
down.
Yeah. And it's actually not... Well, it did reflect the state my mind was in at the time, like my enjoyment of the game. It did not really reflect what they were trying to go for there. If you're going to do the enemies are unending thing, what you want is for them to spawn and ramp up their spawn so fast that no matter what happens, you lose really fast. There's lots of other games. My favorite, weirdly, I'm sure this isn't the best way that it's ever been implemented on, because it's a fairly common trope, but the one that I remember the most is Crisis Core for the PlayStation Portable. Potentially the first PSP game reference on this podcast. But that game ends with a really good example of this trope with limited hardware. I mean, it's the PSP. They still had to, and they were using 3D animated character models.
It was a big deal that the PSP could emulate PlayStation 2 games.
Yes.
To put it in perspective as to what hardware we're working
Crisis Core is like a Final Fantasy 7 prequel.
Yeah.
For anybody who doesn't know.
It wasn't a spin-off of the game Crisis.
No.
They were, look at how good our graphics are on the PlayStation Portable.
But that game ends with an infinite number of mooks spawning up very quickly that just shoot you with guns until you are dead.
Okay.
And it makes it all the better in that circumstance because they're like the cheesy. It's like if the last level of Mario was just like
a million Goombas.
Yeah, it was just Goombas scaling up until the Goombas are unbeatable. That was just.
Oh yeah, it honestly totally made that doable because they stack.
Yeah.
So like you're like up on like you're on like
hundreds of stacks.
Mario is hanging like overalls torn like off of the top of a Bowser flagpole, and the Goombas are stacking up around him, creating a staircase.
They're jumping onto themselves in such a way that it like simulates the churn of the ocean. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good.
Mushblade Mario's sacrifice.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's really what you want in situations like this. You really want your game to end. If you want to talk about impossible odds, godlike circumstances, you need an infinite number of Goombas. You need billions of Goombas to flow like the sea upon you.
Yeah, it kind of felt like they either wanted it to be ambiguous or weren't sure what ending they wanted to go with themselves, but like they were like, is she giving up and just kind of like wants the release of death, so they just have all these enemies descend upon her and kill her, or should she confront Hela and kill her, or whatever,
or at the very least
Hela's
go
supposed to
down
be.
fighting.
Yeah, go down fighting. And it kind of feels like they tried to go like with a halfway thing.
Yeah. Special props to Hela's character model. Holy damn, that is a well done character model of a thing.
I feel like most of the modeling in this game was actually really well done.
Yeah, but like Hela like has this like Andy Serkis kind of Gollum thing going on where like she crawls around in like really creepy ways.
Yeah. The as we mentioned, because I was me and was sprinting, it didn't quite catch me as off guard as it did you.
Yeah, there's that part like right when you enter that realm where that final encounter is, and you're like running across the bridges, and like you get to a spot where you get to the first platform, and she like crawls at you really fast. It scared the shit out of me. Like I was like, it's just like she's just like motionless, and then like all of a sudden she's like right there because she's huge and like crawling at you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that you had the same experience with that last segment, because I thought that I had undercut it personally because I had turned the combat difficulty to easy because I was sick of playing the game and just wanted to get through it faster.
Well,
and I was like, oh, maybe I need to turn it up to hard so that this becomes difficult.
I also, it went forever for me as well, like because they give you like the god sword is like full power at that last part.
Yeah,
and you're just like killing everything effortlessly. So even if you had the difficulty on regular, you probably still would have like gone forever.
Mm-hmm.
Damn. But then the game does end, which was cool.
With like a kind of ambiguous ending. I don't really know what happened.
Neither do I. I was going to ask you guys what happened without using the word Ragnarok. You can't use that word.
Well, it's not related.
Good.
It's okay. The implication, as far as I can tell, is that like the end is you get beaten down. It shows that you're about to get murdered, and then you have this like realization or this recollection of Dylan talking about the importance of letting go, and how like eventually like he should have given up way earlier is what he's saying, is like because he was all kinds of bad shit. So you like accept death, and then through that acceptance you sort of come out of what I'm assuming was some kind of stupor, and then proceed to like go on with your life like none of it actually happened. That's the way that I read it. But there are other ways to read it, that just like accepting death was how she triumphed over the god, or there could be a number of readings.
Yeah, because like you're shown to lose, right? Like you get killed by all the guys, And then there's that cutscene where it's like she accepts death and all that stuff, and she like lets go of the skull, you know, like her
Right.
memento of the past and everything. And then like she comes out of it like back to reality, and she's in that big building at the end of the bridge that you saw.
Right.
And there's just like a dead body there, and she like walks away from it. So like, who was that?
Well, I think
like,
it was-
is that Hella?
Yeah,
Like,
because Hela
Did
puts
she
your
actually
body
kill-
down, and then
yeah.
you do a Freaky Friday.
a Freaky Friday.
and then that's when all that happens. So that kind of ambiguity is the reason why I feel like it's just like playing the unreliable narrator thing up. But at the same time, even not knowing literally what happens, I feel like the ending cutscene hits the tone that the game was going for.
Yeah.
And provides like a semi-satisfactory conclusion to the story of the game. I was generally happy with the ending.
Yeah, because like you get the sense that like she's at peace now, and
Right.
that's all that the story was setting out
Yeah.
to do anyway. So whether she's dead or not, both seem like they would be good.
She had a lot of room to go up
Yeah.
from where she was at.
Yes,
Yeah.
infinite room, really. So you want to talk about that puzzle where it's like completely dark and you have to use your senses to get through it?
Oh, and the good puzzle?
Yeah, like the sweet, awesome puzzle.
But with the one terrifying character model in the game that they never reused.
Yeah.
The thing that is just like lumbering around.
Yeah, the lumbering thing.
The lumbering thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good model.
Yeah, like that's the kind of thing where the indie AAA like angle where I think really shown through. It's like, oh, if this was like produced by like an actual publisher, like this part just wouldn't be in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
You know, like so the whole thing is like it's a mostly like completely pitch black area. You cannot see where you're going. And what you have to do is you have to follow, like you have to move the camera initially to like when it's the controller starts lightly vibrating, and then you have to like follow that through the darkness, and then it changes to like following a voice. Like you have to use your senses to get through it, and it like works really well. Like it's just challenging enough. Like I think they really nailed it.
Yeah. And that's also the part where the thing at the beginning of the game that says this game is best experienced with headphones on for full binaural audio really actually is true.
Oh yeah, this
I think-
game was ruled at that.
Yeah. I felt like most of the audio design in the game generally was pretty ho-hum, I guess. Like, I think that the voice work was obviously really good, and the music where it existed wasn't anything really to write home about. I thought that in this moment, it made you really tense listening for, like, the important sounds in, like, the vacuous black space.
Yeah, I didn't play with headphones.
Oh, neither did I.
Yeah, but apparently, like the voices,
Get fucked, developers.
Yeah, the voices in her head were like recorded with like surround sound, technology, and they feel like they're coming from like all around your head.
That's
Oh,
what I was
inside
referring
your
to.
Yeah.
The games. I noticed weirdly. I don't know if this was intentional or not. That the surround sound of the ambient audio was kind of weird and not always like correct. It's hard for me to
It's
describe
for
the
the
ways that it's
VR
off.
version that's coming.
Right, yeah.
But the sounds of the speakers could just come from anywhere from your perspective. I played like 70-75% of the game with headphones.
Yeah.
And it literally feels like someone's whispering in your ear when otherwise it sounds just like a normal game with headphones on, and it was really effective for me with the contrast. Other sort of like design-based contrast that worked really well for me is how well this game incorporated its third-person perspective into the tones it was trying to convey. The way it almost went back in time in this hilarious way, where it treats the camera like a thing holding a camera. Like Senua constantly looks at the camera in cutscenes, like communicating with the voices, whatever entity is speaking at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you bring that up because we talked earlier where Chad said like you're basically personified as one of the voices in her head, and like those moments where she looks at the camera like really work. Like they don't feel like wink wink, oh she's looking at you, oh isn't it cool. Like it because of like the context, like she looks at you like you're one of the voices in her head, and it like really is effective and it really works.
Yeah.
Like, I think
Added,
that's
of course, by how good the motion capture was.
Yeah. So yeah, that's really effective when it could have easily been cheesy and stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all quality on her gaze with that. That was honestly one of the biggest reasons that it was hard for me to pick up and continue playing the game, because especially in the early moments, I was so freaked out by the way that Senua stares back at you in cutscenes. Like, it actually like made me take a step back. So mission accomplished on that part.
For sure, yeah.
We have anything else we wanted to hit?
I was just going to ask, do we have final thoughts?
This game either needed to be 4 hours long with the same mechanics that it had, or it should have been an absolutely kick-ass experimental film. Either I would have been fine with. As it is, it's pressing up a little bit too hard against its own limitations. In trying to be as long to better simulate like a modern video game campaign experience, it hamstrung itself a little bit. And the goal that it set out in the first place to make me physically uncomfortable is, an admirable goal, a goal that it expressed very, very well, but not necessarily the thing that I always look for in my entertainment. If you haven't played this thing already, keep in mind, it's going to not necessarily scare you, but creep you the hell out.
Emphasis on hell.
Yeah. And if that seems like something that you think is worth a significant chunk of your time, go through it. Like, it's not that big of a burden for you to play this kind of experience, and it is very impressive what they managed to accomplish considering their limitations.
I want to go in here now and offer like the exact converse opinion to most of what you said, which I'm actually a little surprised about. But I think it's because of taste more than anything. Speaking as somebody who does seek out exactly that kind of media, things that are uncomfortable and like creepy or frightening, if you go into this game as like a horror fan, this game will probably disappoint you. You have to go into it as what it sets out to be, which is more of, I guess, an uncomfortable game.
Yeah.
Which that much I can agree on. I also think that your point about it being an experimental film hits the mark like completely right, because I've read quotes from the developers saying like, we wanted to tackle this idea of mental health and psychosis in a way that only games can, and anything could tackle it in the way that this game did.
Yes.
Like, the mechanical elements of it are so rote and not engaging. The puzzle solving was not special. I guess the thing they were going for, now we're going into actual conversation instead of final thoughts, and I'm sorry.
It's okay.
But I know that the thing they were going for is that psychotics have a tendency to be able to see patterns, which is why you're doing things like lining up blocks and shit into runes.
Yeah.
But adventure games have been doing that since like 1995.
And you're not just seeing patterns, which is why the mechanical representation of the psychosis fails.
Right.
The thing that makes someone have that illness is they see the patterns whether they want to or not.
Right.
But that's not what you're doing. You're like, let's go find some patterns.
And you're looking for patterns.
Yeah, and no schizophrenic is just like, all right, pattern time. Like, they're not on board with that. That's why it's bad.
Yeah. So attempting to portray mental illness in a way that is like realistic and like focuses on the character as opposed to somebody from the outside, totally valiant. I'm all about everything that they did to that end. But I think that as a game, it mechanically falls down in that interpretation. Other than that, I just wish that it had more of the laser focus that indie games tend to, and not try and do everything and drop like all the balls. Because you're not juggling. If you're just tossing one ball up in the air, it's a different thing.
And I guess I echo a lot of what you guys said. We're actually a lot more on the same page on this game than I expected. There's a lot of stuff here that doesn't work There's like, you know, a lot of failures in here. But there's also some successes, you know, a number of them. And I would like to see them do another game in this way where they do like a AAA quality game on a lower, more indie level budget. Yeah, I seem the biggest thing against this game is the lack of variety and the fleshing out and the things that the lower budget didn't allow them to do. So if they could iron that stuff out, come up with a concept where they wouldn't have to cut so many corners to make it work, I think they could produce something really good. But
yeah, I feel like they cut all the corners and then took like the shitty corner pieces and stuffed them into other parts of the game to make it bigger.
How many more games like this do you think it'll take before people stop associating Ninja Theory with boob physics?
At least 2 more.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll put the stakes in 2.
One more pair is what it'll take.
Thank you for listening to No Clip this week.
What are we talking about next time?
Next time, we're going to be talking about West of Loathing. Fuck, I don't know anything about the game, so it's really difficult to give, like, that one-sentence summary. But we are talking about West of Loathing.
I've played, like, 2 hours of it, and it is basically, think of a cute, cheeky, like, indie RPG that looks like doodles you drew in your notebook when you were in, like, elementary school.
About the Wild West.
Yeah, it's set in the Wild West.
Yeah, that'll do it. Until then, you can get a hold of us. Go to all of our contact information is on our website at noclippodcast.com, which you can also find at splattershot.pro for some reason. There you can find our YouTube, all of our old episodes, Twitter, etc., email address. Give us a 5-star review on iTunes. Or a 4-star review. I'm lowering my standards. Recommend us to a friend. Tell everybody about it. Thank you for listening. I don't have anything.
Neither do I. This game really does not lend itself to like post-podcast jokes and tomfoolery. I wanted a scene where they like went they went picking flowers in a flare, and I was God damn it. I wanted a scene. I'm so tired.
It's alright.